Hi, Steve Kaplan here. This is take one. I wanted to do a video log to talk about my experience with the Urolift to try to remediate the problems I'm having with a really enlarged prostate. So I've had some issues now for probably the past year. Apparently my prostate was getting really enlarged. I had all the typical symptoms of enlarged prostate. Fortunately, it's all benign, but problems with urination, things like that. Very frustrating. My urologist put me on some medication that kind of helped, but didn't do a really great job. Sometimes it would get better, sometimes it would get worse. So I went back and talked to him, and he did the scope thing to me, which I can tell you if you haven't done it is not exactly pleasant. And then told me that I definitely was a candidate for some surgery, and he was signing me up to do the green light laser. And if you look online, you'll see the different ways they do prostate surgeries. And that's one of them, where they basically take the laser and they just burn a hole through the prostate where the urethra goes, which relieves the pressure. You have to have a catheter after that for a couple days while things heal. And that was his recommendation. There's some side effects with that, though, that didn't sound too appealing to me, including like this retrograde ejaculation where you ejaculate back into your bladder. I guess it's not harmful, but I didn't want to deal with that kind of thing. And also the idea of just burning through tissue didn't sound too appealing. So I did some homework anyway. And I came up with this new solution that's out there called Urolift, which I knew nothing about. When I first heard about it, I thought, oh, this must have come from Europe. But after a little while, I realized that Euro is in urology, duh. So, but anyway, it's supposedly a simple procedure. If you look at the literature, they'll make you think you can go in, 15 minutes later you come out and you go to lunch. But it really is not that simple. So I found a doctor with about an hour away that works with my insurance. They could do the Urolift. They go through the scope. They put some sutures in around and through your prostate that actually lift it up and out of the way and basically lift it off the urethra. So it's a physical thing where they're actually just lifting it up and moving it, hence the name. So it sounded like it's not intrusive, pretty effective. They make it sound like, gee, why wouldn't you want to do this? So I went ahead and found the doctor. He went ahead and did another scope and did an ultrasound and decided that I was a candidate, and we set it up and I went in. Now, he doesn't do it in his office. Some of the doctors do Urolifts right in their office. He says, well, there's too many things that can go wrong. It can be too complicated. Also, the doctor I went to, Dr. Disick, he's in the Boca Raton area. Great references. He's very conservative and basically takes the safest way for sure of doing anything. So he doesn't do it in his office. He says he's not comfortable. He actually does it in the medical center or in the hospital. So he booked time in the hospital. I had to go get a chest x-ray, blood tests, and some other things, COVID test, before I could even go into the hospital for the procedure. But got it all done, went in, and went through the procedure. They actually have an anesthetist. You're actually out. You're right in the operating room. They put you out while they do the procedure. Normally, it only takes a few minutes. So apparently, my prostate was really enlarged compared to others. They were telling me 2 to 3 times larger than average. Also, it was a wet prostate, whatever that is. So anyway, normally they put 2 of these sutures on either side. In my case, he actually used 4 on each side, and decided that I needed to have a catheter. So when I woke up, which I'm not sure how long the procedure really took. It was pretty short, really. The actual procedure was 15 or 20 minutes. But when I woke up, I immediately felt this horrible urge to urinate. I could tell it was like overpowering, painful, really. So I talked to the nurse, and I felt terrible. I had a catheter in. They looked at the tube coming out of the catheter. There was nothing coming out of the tube. Basically, I think what had happened is apparently I've got a real sensitive bladder. So when they put in this catheter, my bladder just went into spasms or bladder cramps where it just squeezed down on this catheter to the point where I couldn't urinate at all. I don't know, actually even know if I had anything to urinate, but the sensation was terrible that I had to really bad. It was like pretty bad. The nurse was getting flustered. Finally, the doctor came in. He tried to take the tube and actually inject water back up into my bladder to try to get things working, to no avail. So we actually pulled out that catheter and put in another catheter, which is something called a three-way. The three-way actually has 3 tubes. One of them is the discharge. Another one inflates the little balloon that blows up in your bladder. And the third one is so they could actually take fluid and they run it down in your bladder, then back out to flush out your bladder. He was really concerned that with bleeding, although there really wasn't that much bleeding. I mean, there was some. I guess he was just really concerned and being ultra conservative. So he put that thing in, and unfortunately, with my super sensitive bladder, it kept going into these spasms and cramps. I mean, they're painful like you wouldn't believe. So I've read that about 1 out of 4 men have these bladder cramps. So I guess I was the 1 out of 4. So anyway, they finally injected liquid up in there through the thing and got some liquid coming back out and some bloody urine, which is normal, and hooked me up to some bags and started irrigating my bladder. So they decided, because I was in such pain and he was concerned, he actually kept me in the hospital overnight. And they were running bags of saline solution through me, like one big bag about every 45 minutes. It was a pretty miserable experience. The bladder cramps were happening about every 30 to 45 minutes. You could feel them coming ahead of time. So you have this overriding sensation that you have to urinate really bad. But of course, there's nothing you can do about it. You have a catheter going up in your bladder. But the sensation was bad. And then these cramps would come on, and I could feel my whole pelvic area going into spasm. And then when they do that, I mean, your pain level just shoots right off the chart, basically. And they would last for 30, 45 seconds or so, and then they'll slowly relax, and then you're good for another, 20 or 30 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever it happens to be. So this went on all night long. I was hoping he would take the catheter out the next morning, but no, he decided that by the time he got in the hospital, it was too late. He was concerned if something went wrong, it'd be too hard to get back to me. So he left the thing in for another day, still having these bladder cramps. At this point, I'm thinking he's being overly cautious because this catheter is causing me much more issue than the actual procedure. But he's the doctor, so I went home. Every move was agony with this thing. This catheter is like weighing right on the nerve that makes you feel like you have to urinate, and then the cramps are still happening. Go back up there the next day after another hour's drive, and he removes the thing, and which is immediate relief. Okay, the bladder cramps stopped as soon as he removed it. And at that point, I left the office. I was able to urinate okay, so that was good news. Basically sent me home, where I came home and thought, okay, I can start to recover from the process. So the recovery was nothing that I expected as well. I think a lot of the issues I had were based because of the catheter. The catheter had those nerves going through my urethra, the whole area, so inflamed that I had these, horrible feelings of having to urinate with no real relief. I was constipated, and basically that whole area became just a whole confusing mess of nerve endings. Like if I felt like I was constipated, like I had to have a bowel movement, it would really cause all kinds of other horrible urges to urinate. Just a miserable experience, really. Took me a few days. It started to subside a little bit. I was able to have a bowel movement. When they suggest you take stool softeners, absolutely do it. If you try to have a bowel movement after going through this. I mean, the pain is terrible. I would start bleeding again, and I would have some blood clots coming out in my urine. So definitely do the stool sample or the stool softener. So really at this point it's just a slow recovery, right? After a few days, the sensations and the urgency to urinate start to subside. But there is another side effect that I wasn't expecting, and that is that I couldn't sit down. Apparently when I would try to sit in a chair, it was putting pressure up in that area, up in my pelvis, up through my anus, I guess, and also in my bladder and prostate gland. But anyway, you try to sit, and it was so painful I couldn't do it. So for several days, I could either stand up, I could lay down, or I could kind of kneel for a while, which was I was trying to actually work on my computer because I'm home based. But so no sitting anyway for several days, almost a week really, before I could sit down. Then that started to finally become relieved as well, and it was just a slow recovery at that point. I could after several days I could urinate pretty well. At first, like I say, the nerve endings are really screwed up. You feel fine, and suddenly, oh, I've got to go, and you need to run because the signal didn't come to tell you that your bladder was full. But that kind of calms down after a while. After enough stool samples, I was able to have some bowel movements, and that started to get back under control as well. So I'm starting to recover. And then after the first week, I was able to sit down for, first 20 minutes, then 30, 40 minutes. And then now it's been 3 weeks. I'm pretty much back to normal. But it took really a full 2 weeks before I really felt like I was more or less back to normal with urination and bowel movements. And actually into the third week, really, I still feel a little sensitivity, but not too much. So that was all a lot better. So anyway, I wanted to let some people know, if you're considering the Urolift, maybe for you it would be a lot easier to go through. I really think most of the difficulties I had really were related to that catheter, and having to have that catheter for so long, basically almost 2 complete days, while I was having these terrible bladder cramps and spasms. So I really attribute most of my issues to the catheter, not the procedure. So if you're lucky enough so you can come out, don't have to have a catheter, probably you're just going to have some discomfort for a few days. I don't think you'll go through everything that I went through. Okay, so anyway, that should give you at least some idea. My thought was, I wish I had heard some people's stories that have gone through this to basically tell me what the experience was really like. Like I say, for me, it was a lot more severe than the literature led you to believe, which is like, hey, straightforward, it takes 15 minutes, you come out, and you're all good to go. So that really is just not the case. So I hope this has been helpful. If you're considering it, remember that I'm probably a special case. My case, my enlargement was twice as much. It was really a very enlarged prostate. And also I had some really bad reactions to the catheter. Well, so hopefully it wouldn't be that bad. If you've been through the procedure and care to, please leave some comments and let people know what your experience was like. And hopefully this will give somebody something to think about anyway. Okay, Steve here. One last bit that kind of came up after I did the first one. There was a question about what about ejaculation and sexual performance. So the literature says you can start having sex again after the first week. Okay, so I don't think that's going to happen. So with me, the first week after the procedure, I was in so much pain and discomfort that you don't even think about it. The second week was a little crazy in that the pain was starting to subside, but every time that I would think about anything that was arousing at all, my whole pelvic area would start getting this really painful aches. And I guess it was part of the arousal response, making your prostate do something, but it was painful. like you're trying to think of like dead puppies or something to try to turn it off, right? So that was the entire second week. There was nothing was happening there. It was too much painful. After about 2.5 weeks, things were starting to get a little bit better. After 3 weeks, probably 80% there. So hoping still have a little recovery happening in that area. But I just wanted to let you know that I don't know about what they're talking about the literature, but that sure wasn't true for me. Okay, take care.